Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So as promised before, we're going to do a quick walkthrough of a sample proposal. So I've got a sample proposal opened up here, and this is the exact language I use for the proposal, except for, of course, the proposal name and client's information taken out. So if you came to this video, you probably came from my mailing list with the Ultimate Proposal Guide. However, if you did not, if you found me on YouTube or on Google, I'm going to link down below where you can download the Ultimate Proposal Guide, as well as download a drag and drop proposal that you can keep for yourself and you can basically make a copy of. We've got it in Keynote, we've got it in PowerPoint, and we also have it in Google Slides, as well as a PDF version for you to drop your client's content into, so it's a grab and go sort of template. So let's go through this one. I'm going to go through the different components that we have, as well as the rationale behind it, why I included those. So this proposal has a little bit of background. I've been doing web development for just under a decade, and this proposal has been the culmination of working with clients over that time. So during the time, I've had proposals that have been much longer. I've also had proposals that have been much shorter than this. This seems to be the sweet spot. We've pulled out all the unnecessary stuff. We've also included everything that the client usually asks for upfront, and we want to answer that ahead of time. So the entire goal of our proposal, there's a few things it's supposed to accomplish. So first things first, you want to tell them the price of the project. You want to tell them the approximate time span of the project. Of course, there's going to be factors like them creating content that could change those deadlines. Any major milestones, set their expectations, and don't overwhelm them. Speak in their language. That's everything I've learned so far from making proposals for the better part of the last decade. So let's dive in. Right now we have the cover page. It's pretty standard. We want to include the name of the company and the person's name personally that you are addressing it to. This is usually a point of contact or a major decision maker. We also have our contact information just down below here, project proposal, and then we also have today's date. In the templates I provide, today's date, you can autofill that as well. So as we scroll down, we've got the first page here. This is a bunch of filler content, but I do have in the guide some swipe copy of the exact content that I would use in this section. Basically, there's a few different components that you want to cover. What are their major goals? Who are they trying to serve? And how you can solve their problems for them. Also, what I like to add in as a bonus are some future projections of things that they want to see, or things that you've seen rather, come up that they can incorporate into the website for that extra wow factor. I know a long time ago, and this is going to sort of age myself in this business, but a long time ago, a wow factor was having a mobile accessible website. That's not a wow factor anymore. That needs to be part of the project. But you can include other elements as well as other accessibility and inclusive elements. Now, these should be part of the core project anyways, but you can wow them with things that you know that a lot of other developers would actually leave out. It shows that you're knowledgeable, shows that you've done your homework, and shows that you're, most importantly, on the cutting edge of what's going on. We have a whole other set of tutorials about pricing. So when we get down to the pricing section, we're going to talk about the location of the pricing, but we're not going to break down exactly what goes into a pricing project, because that's a very big topic to cover all on its own. So we've got our objective. So you want to cover those elements in the objective. You want to tell them what you guys are building together, some major milestones along the way, and what they can expect as some results. And if you have the potential to throw in any wow factors in there, this is a great place to do it. So we've got the objective page. So now we move on to core components of web development. These can also be core components of web design and development too. Because I'm not a designer, a lot of my proposals are geared just towards web development. So if you're a designer, you can amend this accordingly, but it can apply for both. So I have set pretty much exactly a lot of the items that I cover in my proposal in here. Sometimes this ends up being 2 pages long, and that's totally fine. This is where we go in, this is where we set expectations, this is where we confirm platforms that we will be using, because a lot of this stuff is covered during some of the preliminary discovery conversations. So we definitely go through those components. We want to make sure that we cover security, backups. These are a lot of sort of fundamental components that apply to every single site that you're going to build, no matter what software or application it's built on. So we definitely want to make sure we have testing transactions for a variety of scenarios. If it's a physical product we want to do, even if you're not taking on the supply chain, we want to do a little bit of mapping of this out, because we want to close the circle. You don't want to leave anything left unanswered, because in those items that go unanswered when someone has the proposal in their hand, that's what brings up doubts in them. So we want to do our best to answer all these questions before they even bring them up. So they're probably going to wonder, how am I going to edit the site? What kind of dashboard am I going to use? That's where we cover, where we're going to use WordPress or Shopify, whatever it is that you choose to use. This was for a very specific client. Of course, there's going to be stuff in here that's very use case specific, because I pulled this straight from an existing proposal. So we're also going to look for the best hosting. So even if they already have hosting and you're doing a new site, you still want to do some research on new hosting, because things, as we know, things change and things evolve over time. So in these components, we don't necessarily just want to cover the components of the build itself, but we want to cover these as components of the entire project working together. So some components of that will be research, and some components of that will be discovery. A lot of components of that will be testing, and a lot of the components of that will be support. Nothing that I mentioned is directly related to the coding of the website, but these are all elements that come into play to create a full project experience. And this is what shows your client that you know all of the steps, and you know how it needs to be mapped out, and you know that there is a lot of considerations. This combined with the objective page helps your client feel taken care of, which is so important. When people make decisions to work with someone, a lot of the times those are based on how that person makes them feel emotionally, and it's not necessarily all based on numbers. So in the beginning of this proposal, we want to make sure that the client knows we are taking care of everything, we are educated, and we are always innovating, and we're always looking out for the best solution for their quote-unquote problem. Sometimes it's not a problem, sometimes it's like growth and things like that, but they need to know with these first few pages that we have their back. So of course now we've got the objective and we have the components covered, and then the next page we want to move into timeline. These will vary per project, and I always tell clients too that this is a gauge. This is a guideline to major milestones throughout the project, and it's not 100% definitive, but rather a ballpark. The reason it's a ballpark is because a lot of these elements rely on clients producing content on time. For example, I have a client right now, and we are quite behind schedule because we are, depending on when you're watching this video, because right now we happen to be in the middle of a pandemic, and during this time, it's a lot harder to warehouse physical products that people are sort of inside the warehouse and able to fulfill in real time when they're ordered. So we are having some supply chain difficulties right now. Obviously, these things are out of our control, and we're doing our best to accommodate. So these are the circumstances that you can let clients know that timelines may not be 100%, but as a guideline, if we get everything done on time, this is a good gauge of how long something would take. Now, this is a gauge of one of my projects, so these would vary in time for your projects as well. I do think that these, in my experience, are pretty good guidelines though, because remember, when you're doing this, within the design period, you need to account for time between feedback between you and the client. Discovery has already started, so it's the first phone calls that you got. It's the client reviewing this proposal. Development, of course, we all know can take longer than we anticipate, especially when we're building some new functionality. We're dealing with clients who already have mailing lists and already have external softwares that we need to be able to integrate in a lot of cases. Sometimes this can be like 6 to 8 weeks, but I like to err on the side of giving a little bit more time. And then if we're ready to go after 8 or 10 weeks, then we can move directly into testing, which would typically take around 2 weeks before deployment as well too. So depending on the size of the project, a lot of the times when you think that you can finish a project with maybe 20 hours of development time in 1 week, usually multiply that by 3 to 4, because we're always looking for clients to get us deliverables, clients to get us content. And whenever there's multiple people involved in a project, there's always going to be some lag time back and forth. Of course, not everyone, because we want to work remotely, right? So not everyone is also going to be in our time zone. So there's going to be some changes, maybe with getting stuff to us that could be different if we were in person and in the same city or time zone as the client, if that makes sense. One of my clients is in Australia, so she's on the other side of the world. She has the complete opposite schedule, which works out really well sometimes. So if there's stuff that I need to get done, I can get it done, and she reviews it the next day. But if there's something with a tight timeline, the time change can really significantly delay. So there's a lot of factors to take into the timeline. This one, for a I would say medium-sized project, and we'll get into project sizes a little bit later, but for a medium-sized project, this seems to be a timeline, and from a lot of my colleagues, this is a timeline that usually happens to be. A lot of them cut it a bit shorter in the proposal, but we always end up going over, and this ends up being a more realistic timeline. Great, so they've got their timeline. They also have a visual representation of a timeline. This is included in the template as well too, so you have that. My name is taken out of your template, so that won't get popped in by accident. But we always want to do sort of a visual representation for clients when we can, and divide things up so they're easy to digest in this format. After we've got timeline, it's like, okay, how do we get started? So I break it up into 4 major phases. We have discovery and design, development, testing and deployment, and training and follow-up. So these, I find, are the major milestones in any typical project, and because they are the major milestones that the client's going to see the most progress at, this is how I want to chunk it. If you're dividing up a proposal into any sort of components, you want to think about what makes sense to the client. There might be something completely different that makes sense to you as a developer to divide it up into, like maybe it's installing, say if you're doing WordPress, so maybe it's installing WordPress core, downloading a theme, installing plugins. The client doesn't care about that. The client wants to know, when am I going to see milestones? When am I going to see progress? So that's what I divided my proposal into. Discovery and design is, those are the first things that they're going to see. Now, since I'm not a designer, feel free, if you are, there's tons of room in here in the template to fill in any details, links to inspirational designs, past work portfolios that you've done before. So this template can work for designers and developers. Typically during discovery, a few of the items that we'll cover are initial calls. That can a lot of times take more than one phone call to come up with a price, because you might have to do some research. So some dedicated research time, the call times, the schedule of call times, the sitemap. Sitemap is basically a listing of pages included in the project. A lot of the times I'm just going to go back up here. A lot of times in the components, we will, this site it already had existing pages, so we know that we're basically creating the site from scratch using the existing pages. If you're creating a brand new site, definitely outline the pages included. You can duplicate this page here and literally just list out the pages that are included, which can be helpful as well. So for discovery, we've got those, and then after the discovery It's usually a lot of conversations about what kind of design styles they like, which sort of bleeds into design time. I'm not going to go through all the details of design. If you guys have worked with designers before, you know that there's a back and forth process between them and the client, really putting together assets, finding who they are, figuring that out visually, and iterating from there. So after that process, the designs are usually handed off to the developer and also signed off on from the client, saying they approve for these designs to be developed. And this is the major thing that clients see. It's the first major thing that they, like, tangible thing that they can see from the site. So they see that all the designs are completed and then are handed off to development as a major milestone. All right, development. You'll see that because I am a developer, this section is a little bit more robust than the top section up here. Designers, if you need more room up here, you can do that. You can always dedicate this page completely to discovery and then duplicate this page and do a full design page like this, as well as a full development page. But so you can create and duplicate some of these slides to sort of fit the project, which is what I do a lot. So after you finish the designs, we're getting into development. So this is when all the assets are officially handed over to a developer. And in here, we want to be really mindful of not overwhelming the client. So we want to make sure that they are aware of everything that we are taking care of during development without talking too technical. So if you want to say, like, oh, we want to install this plugin, and then we have to, like, get an SSL key and do that, like, all of the technicalities, don't do that in development. We really want to break it down into something simple like custom coding of finalized designs. That's easy for a client. They understand what that means. They typically understand what WordPress or Shopify are, and creating the custom files and setting those up on the server. They typically know what these things are. Now, if they don't, you can go into a bit more description of that as well. I typically work with clients where this is not their first website. They've actually been in online business for a few years. So I know that there's a lot of terms in online business that can be overwhelming for someone just starting out. But I know for my clients, they are okay with terms like set up the custom theme for WordPress or Shopify. They understand that. So really, it's a matter of meeting your clients where they are at. Don't fill it full of jargon, but if they have been in business for a few years online, you can probably go into a little bit more detail than you can with a brand new online client, for sure. So I also put out the guidelines here too. I tell them that I will be developing on a local environment. Now you might need to explain to clients what that is, which you can do as well. My clients, a lot of them know what that is. Like I said, they've been in online business for a while. And when they know that you're doing a local environment, that's sort of on your personal computer or on like a selection of personal computers. After development's about 90%, we put it to a testing website on a private server. Now, that means to them that once it's at 90%, we're working up to it. Once it's at 90%, then they can see it. I do this to prep them for a few different things. And I do this in a few areas throughout the proposal. So you'll see down here, it says 80% down here. So it's usually 80 to 90%. But during the development, that they don't see and hear much from me, especially in the first few weeks of it, because as you know, you're setting up a lot of your items. But you need to tell them that. You can't just disappear. That's one of the key components that I've mentioned throughout it. Even though you're working away, if they don't hear from you for 3 or 4 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, however long it is, they will start to question things for sure. So make sure that they know ahead of time that there is going to be a chunk of time where you're building the foundation of the website that they may not hear much from you, because you've done all of your research and discovery, you've got all your assets from the designer, and you ultimately have everything that you need to get started. So that's what I try to make explicit here. And then I also tell them that once we're at about 80 to 90%, that they get access to the site as well as access. I'll give access probably to one of their assistants or business partners as well. That's when we start going through and doing testing. So that's ultimately when there's always a bit of overlap because there's that last 10 to 20%. And sometimes we are uploading more content and stuff like that too. So it's not until we have everything uploaded that we can officially start testing, but we can start testing on some different devices, navigations, things like that that have been completed at this time. So this is where we want to make sure that clients' expectations are set and then they understand what we're doing. So this is where we go into final edits, we start testing, integration with outside software like their mailing list. We want to make sure we have constant communication about what we believe to be working on desktop and mobile, and to be able to give input to make it a better experience. So even though you have all of the designs from the designers, it doesn't mean there isn't room for you to improve things, especially if you have experience with accessibility, you have experience in UX design, if you have experience in applications. Like, there's so much more experience that you have as a developer that you can bring to the table that can influence design in a positive way. So keep that in mind too. And when you come across these instances, make that clear to both your customer and the designer, because you also don't want to blindside everyone with completely changing things. So during the design process, you should be present for a lot of those meetings because you have the ability to tell them whether that functionality will work or not. However, you can always make adjustments afterwards too if you start developing something and think, hey, this is really working, or I really think like I've had another client do the same thing. They're not seeing great results, but I've had another client that's made this design tweak that's made everything like a million times better. And that might just be a matter of changing labels on forms, mentioning where there's sort of what looks like a hidden menu somewhere, and making things a little bit more obvious for the user. So don't be afraid. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but don't be afraid to make changes during development and bring those up with the designer and the client. Everyone's on the same page here, and your ultimate goal is to be able to make this as great of a project as you can. And this is also another thing too, telling the client that you're in their corner and you have their best interests in mind. So that's the big thing that we want to convey with this proposal. You want to give them confidence in you. So this is how I go about doing development. Now, my process has changed a little bit in that the staging site rather, is set up from the beginning because we have multiple people programming to it, and it's it's set up to GitHub and stuff like that too. We don't need to tell them that. We don't need to tell them about all those technical things. Ultimately, we'll be creating the site behind the scenes. So if you don't want to say local environment, you can also say behind the scenes, which is fine as well. And telling them that they get access when we're almost done to start to go through, upload the content, and make all the changes that way as well. So, development. Go through your process, the expectations that they can have, and then deliverables in plain language. All right, after that, people want to know what the process is after it's made. So if it's on a staging server, they have their own domain. How does the site get over to their domain? Well, I let them know we do all the testing on the staging site, so we make sure everything's working. However, we always tell them that every server is going to be a little bit different. So no matter what we test on the staging site, when we deploy, we will always do more testing on the live site as well to make sure things are working correctly. That means testing opt-ins, testing transactions, everything that is that we're doing on the staging site. I want to make sure we run at least one more test when we go live as well. I set their expectations for testing here as well too. So we go through the last 3 versions of every browser. As we know, Chrome iterates fairly quickly, so we can cover probably a lot more than 3 versions of something like that. This depends on sort of their requirements, which you also want to figure out during discovery as well. What do they need their device to work on? Most modern websites, you'll be fine with all the major browsers in the last 3 versions. However, there are some companies that work in that work on sort of older computers. It's like a more complex network that they haven't really got around to upgrading, and sometimes you have to do things like support Internet Explorer. Make sure you make it clear in the testing whether you are or are not supporting it, so when it comes through, if somebody goes to check in their iPhone 3 and it doesn't render 100%, you want to be clear that we are covering this percentage of testing. The other thing I want to mention about testing is that when you go into someone's Google Analytics during the discovery period, because if they have a history of analytics set up, this is something that you should be doing during the discovery period. Go in and look at their analytics and see exactly what browsers that they are using and what browsers their customers and visitors are using rather, and what browsers need to be supported through their website, because that will give you the exact data you need to know what you need to test for. Otherwise, I don't go back further than an iPhone 6, and I test on two different Androids. I test on the Google Pixel and also Samsung. I have one tablet that I test both views on, but also the biggest thing to accommodate tests is I try to make sites as fluid as possible. So making them as fluid as possible, being able to move through all of the different sizes with as few media queries as possible. So that's kind of the goal when we're doing it anyways. So just in case there's any edge cases that we forgot in here or we didn't cover, it should work on those also, because we've prepped with our media queries to make sure it's a smooth transition through all the sizes. So make sure you cover what you're going to test. Make sure you cover what you're not going to test, especially if it's an older company. So keep that in mind too. Always check the analytics if you have access to them to see what websites what devices and browsers their website's being viewed on already, because that'll give you some hard data to back this up. Deployment. This is always exciting to them. So this is where we tell them when we're going to go live. We do SEO setup. Some deliverables are deployment to the final server, backup configuration, registering their site for Google Analytics, and so on. So after intensive testing, we transfer the site to the final domain, ping the Google to recrawl it. Many host companies work a little different, but we also do one last round of testing on the final domain. I would also add in here, I know it's not in here right now, I think it's in the template though, if we add in here that websites can take up to 48 hours to propagate, so definitely let them know not to make any major announcements until 48 hours after we deploy. Now, we all know that usually it does not take that long. Usually within 1 to 2 hours, things are ready to go. However, any host company will still tell you it could take up to 48 hours. So I would still wait on any major announcements for that. Make sure you clear caches, all of that kind of stuff as well. Clear caches, set up SSL certificates, all the stuff for deployment. Now, after deployment, they kind of want to know, like, are you going to leave me hanging or what's going to happen? So then we've got training and follow-up. So depending on the size of the site, I usually allow access to, included in the quote, there's access to me 30 days with any of the site that needs changed, updating, beyond the 30 days, or if any part of the site needs updated or changing, we do quote that out into a phase 2 of the project. But within those 30 days, if there's any features that we created that are faulty, we will fix those within 30 days. Some of the times with small sites or just updates to existing site, I'll just do 14 days. But it's usually between 14 and 30 days. If it's an enormous project, I will build in sort of like almost like a 90-day retainer into it, which has been the case before for quite complex. If it's like a complex custom membership and e-commerce site, sometimes we'll do that too. Now, this isn't free training. This is built into the price. So this is part of the value that you offer. So keep that in mind as well too. So we do go through the training, which I record videos of, and then I make a private playlist for them. So they can access all those videos, and I wrote written instructions for the key components. That way they have the whole site trained for them, and if they have a virtual assistant or if they hire an agency, they can literally just hand over all the documentation. as well as refer to it anytime that they get stuck as well. So we have all of that. They have access to me via email with a 24-hour turnaround time. If it's like a major bug, we need a little bit more than 24 hours, but most of the time those have all been taken care of in the testing period. Usually it's something like, hey, my cousin opened it on mobile and this picture's overlapping something. So usually it's a lot of CSS fixes. Sometimes with commerce sites, it's calling PayPal, some sort of token or tracking doesn't work. So there's stuff like that that may take a more than 24-hour turnaround time, but at least you're going to be in contact with them during that time. So also to be clear, when the support ends, so after the 30 days, they will be phased into priced into a phase 2, or if you offer any ongoing retainer packages, they have the option to get one of those as well. So this is the meat of it, and then we get to the money page. So these are all, again, this comes in the template. So this is all stuff you can grab directly. Now there's a few aspects to this page that I've added over time that have become important. Of course, the project, you don't have to keep initial in here. This was a project that included multiple phases, but you can put project estimate, include the price, project proposal, the proposal project total reflects in good faith estimate based on existing understanding of objectives and priorities of the client. Full cost is what I believe to a realistic estimate in order to accomplish the following. And then I go into the different phases. So you want to say in a nutshell, you can take this, but you want to say in a nutshell, I did my research. I looked at all the possible components. I look at how I can best support you in this build, and this is the final price. So that's what you want to convey in this section. Now over in here, there's a few disclaimers we want to include. So this is an estimated range of the website development. If you choose to go through a complete rebrand, this is assuming this client already had their branding done. So we were building a site that already had some design elements, but if they wanted to go through a full rebrand, and your existing website is not covered in the proposal, these changes will be reflected in a separate estimate. And this does happen a fair amount, I would say. Somebody asks for features that are not included in the proposal, they get scoped out in a separate estimate. And I'm going to have some more videos on those sort of conversations and how to navigate them. Next up is disclaimer. So the price is valid for 30 days from issue. This is a very important statement because what can happen and why this statement is in here is I've sent off a proposal, and then 2 years later, I had a client come back to me and say, okay, I'm ready to go forward, but these rates have changed. Your rates are going to grow and evolve over time. So you want to have a proposal expiration date. Mine is 30 days because the project tends to be a little bit bigger. Sometimes these people need a couple weeks to go back and forth with budgets. You can do 7 and 14 days, I have also seen. And then basically you're saying if you agree to this project outside of it, it will be, you can't guarantee this rate. So they'll be subjected to likely another higher rate if they want to do that. And that's totally fine. And you have told them ahead of time. So this is really handy to have in your back pocket. I haven't had to bring this up a lot, but the times I have, it has said like it's valid for 30 days, and they understand because that's something that they've agreed to. We also want to include what it doesn't cover. Some people don't fully understand what design and development cover and don't cover. And when you're in the industry a while, these things can get a little bit lost or taken for granted. So we've got a list of things that it does not include. Also, this list is not definitive. So there's other items that I might put in there if it's specific to the project, something that I know a client needs, but I know that it's going to be an additional cost for them, I want to make sure to put it in this list so they know it's not included. So we don't include hosting, we don't include photography or stock photography, CRM or like mailing list software, continuous maintenance beyond launch, premium plugins. I actually do include a bunch of premium plugins, but I put this in here because if I were to cancel my development plugins 5 years from now, I want them to know that they will have to purchase their own premium plugins after that. Additional assets, PDFs, videos, any of those other assets. Does not include copywriting or marketing either. So this is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of components to this page. It looks very simple, but keep in mind there's a few different things going on that have evolved over time, knowing what happens with proposals. So, and then you want to give them next steps. So if the client, you can change the client for their name just to make it a little more personal. If you choose to move forward, you can proceed the terms of the contract. Depends. Now, payment schedules, we're going to totally talk about that another time. I'm going to make a whole video just for that. But for large projects, I would usually say if the project's more than, well, medium to large projects, if the project's more than $12,000 to $15,000, I'll split it into 3 because it's over a longer timeline. If the project's under $15,000, I usually do 50-50. 50 on commencement, 50 before deployment. So you want to make sure that you invoice them and they pay you before you deploy, and make sure that's in the contract as well. So we'll cover that in other videos too. But you want to make sure you lay out the payment schedule and any major timelines and or milestones that they are tied to. And then again, I know we talked about the timeline a little bit earlier, but if you do a little bit of math and add those dates together, then you can calculate approximately when you would be starting the project and finishing the project as well. So also on the right hand side here, we've got a little bit of social proof. So I included a quotation in here from one of my good clients. And then we have the call to action. This is a clickable button that goes straight to open up my email and says that they want to begin. So there's no friction here. They can start right away, has all of the terms laid out. We'll go into contracts in another video, but the proposal is separate from the contract. But this is probably one of the more comprehensive proposals that I've been able to put together. It covers all the elements, and it's still only, this one's 10 pages, but also there's a cover page. And these last 2 pages are pretty minimal looking. So it's 10 pages. It's not an overwhelming amount of information, but it tells the client that you know what you're talking about. It puts them at ease, and it shows that you have their back and their best interests for creating a profitable business in mind. Again, you can duplicate these templates too. You can change up the colors on the side. I'll include all the links below for the swipe scripts that I've created, as well as a purchase link to purchase the template, if that's what you want to do too. I've showed you everything in this video pretty transparently, so you don't have to purchase the template. You can go through the video and just recreate your own one step at a time. So these are the tools to be able to do that as well. I'm not hiding anything in the purchase version. The purchase version is exactly this, what you can see right here in those 3 different formats. So let me know in the comments below. Shoot me a line if you have a question, and thanks so much, guys.